Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from, zooming in from around the world. We really appreciate your participation today on a very important topic. I'm Doug Grundy, founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We do fun things like this, interesting things, hopefully educational things. We call them Globinars. Everybody does webinars. Global Chamber is the only organization that does Globinars, and the intent is to have educational information that's appropriate for our members to help them to the next level in whatever you're trying to do. Typically, certainly be more successful and undoubtedly to grow. The economies around the world are in our way. There are all sorts of obstacles, but that's not stopping many of you. And so our goal today is perhaps to give you an idea or two, a connection or two, to be able to shift to something better for your business. So I'm going to introduce now our moderator for the conversation that we'll have with three experts. I'll come back in the Q&A section. So if you have questions along the way, pop them into the Q&A section or send them to info@globalchamber.org and we'll process them in the last 30 minutes. We're not going to go more than 60 minutes. And so hang on to your chairs. Listen intently, keep your mind open, and have a lot of fun with the speakers that we have today. The first person then I'd like to introduce is Susan Asadi. She's the co-founder of GAPR. It's a PR firm, and she is the world's expert on if you ever wanted to be connected to anything in the financial world of New York City and the United States. Susan is the person you'd want to talk to. She's also the director of Global Chamber New York City, and so we're really proud and honored to have Susan representing Global Chamber, also all the work that she does with GAPR, and to be our moderator today. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Doug. That was a very kind introduction. I appreciate it. So now I wanted to introduce our three speakers. I'm joined by three British transplants. So you're going to hear that in their accent. And they can probably all tell you where to get the best beer in Manhattan. So first we're going to lead off with Andrew Howlett. He's the manager of partnerships at Cambridge Global Payments. He's worked in this industry since about 2008, and then he started out in London before relocating here. So Andrew, if you could give us a few thoughts on what you've been hearing in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny. I was just thinking, I started out working in FX and international payments from very, very beginning in 2008. And just in line with what I do for a job, the US dollar was about to hit its peak at about $2.11 to the British pound. Everything was perfect in the world. And then the subprime mortgage crisis hit. Lehman Brothers went bankrupt and the world fell apart. And I got a front row seat. And I've been in the global payments business ever since, primarily in a sales capacity. But what's interesting this time around is I started working for a newly launched partnerships division at my company in January of this year. And of course, we've now got COVID and seemingly another recession. So I feel whenever I start something new, the world's about to fall apart. So I do apologize. I can take some blame for that. But just in line with what we're going to talk about today, I manage a partnerships team. Effectively, our job is to be the bridge between our external partners and our internal sales team. So I've spent a lot of time kind of on both sides of the fence, speaking with people as COVID has unraveled. Cambridge is a global payments company and a foreign exchange risk management solution provider. Effectively, what we do is we work with companies that have a need to make or receive payments internationally, and our objective is to find a flexible and tailored approach outside of traditional banking formats. We have clients in almost every industry. We're a global organization. We have head office in Toronto, Canada. I work for the US head office in New York, but we have regional operations out of Sydney, London, and then we cover our jurisdictions based from there. We're one of the largest non-bank providers of international payment solutions in North America. And, like I said, our objective is to find flexible solutions outside of the traditional banking routes And what we're able to give our clients is effectively access through our portal to over 100 different banking and payment providers worldwide. And then they get a choice of ways to process payments. You know, I can dive into that a bit later, but you know, you're typically looking at local dispersions, you know, the blockchain technologies that are emerging. All these we provide at our clients' fingertips, and everything that we do is tailored to their specific business model. And yeah, thanks, Susan, for you know, having us join up today. It was a shame we started the Global Chamber. I mean, I started with the Global Chamber at the end of last year. We did one event, which was great, and here we are doing everything virtually. So hopefully it won't go on forever. But you know, this is essentially where we're at right now.
Yeah, let's hope the next time we meet, optimistically, will be in person for a New York Chamber event. All right, so next up will be Adam. He's the founder and CEO, Adam Hall. He's founder and CEO of AM Hall Consulting. It's an events company that works both with big businesses and nonprofit companies. So Adam, you want to share a couple of thoughts with us?
Sure, certainly.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me, Doug and Susan. I'm a brand new member to the Global Chamber, so looking forward to being involved and continuing this journey with everybody. Yeah, my story is slightly similar to Andrew's story, obviously from the UK as well. I moved over to the US, to New York, about 6 years ago. And really, I spent my career predominantly in events, delivering big global conferences around the world. And I was really passionate about how people can connect more authentically and how that supports to drive business. The second angle of what I was really interested in is not just really how you drive business, but how you can drive business, but also have a meaningful impact. So the term of purpose-driven business is being thrown around a lot now, particularly with everything that's going on in the world. So I really wanted to combine a business like that. So I took a huge leap from a nice, comfortable job and decided to be an entrepreneur and set up my own business, which is still existing today. And we focus primarily in 3 different areas. The first one is events. So we deliver a lot of events for mainly non-profit clients to help them with fundraising and connections to big level donors. But we also deliver events for businesses as well to help them to connect to new clients. How can they entertain current clients from that aspect? So we do golf days, galas, private dining dinners. The second aspect of what we do is strategy, which has been incredibly important right now with everyone. And I know we're going to move the conversation on and discuss it, but with people having to think about pivoting and what they're doing in their business, we've been working with a lot of our clients to help them think about their business strategies. How can they approach new business? What more do they need to do? Do they have an effective board at the moment? And then the third angle is actually direct outreach, where we go out and find potential corporate partners, donors, mainly for nonprofits, new business opportunities for some of our business clients. So I combine those 3 areas into what we do at AM Hall Consulting. We work across the US, predominantly with a lot of major league sports teams, helping them drive their business and create meaningful partnerships with what they're doing in their communities. The last few months have been an interesting one for an events company, and I know we'll dive a bit deeper into it. We've done some interesting stuff. But yeah, no, that's kind of a breakdown, a background of me and what we do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adam. And last, but certainly not least, is our Charles Bernard. He's the CEO of Criteria for Success. He's an accomplished speaker and trains thousands of CEOs, sales managers, and salespeople on the art of business. So Charles, do you have some thoughts you want to share with us, please?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. First of all, thank you, Doug and Susan. And like Adam, we're new members. We joined a couple of weeks ago. We're thrilled to be part of the Global Chamber. And I run an organization called Criteria for Success, as Susan mentioned. We're a sales training, management consulting firm, and we also develop online sales playbooks. So they're cloud-based, and salespeople actively participate in the development with us. It's a very collaborative process in really pulling out the best unique selling practices for each organization we work with. It's very consultative. Our company is located, the office, which hasn't been inhabited for 3 months going on practically. March 13th was the last day we were in my office. But if you wanted to know where my office was, it's on 41st Street and Lexington Avenue, And for anybody who knows Manhattan, it's a stone's throw away from Grand Central Station. And what we do primarily is solve problems, and some of the problems we're hearing now in particular more than ever, but these have been recurring problems, but because of COVID-19, some of the problems we're coming across are people not having a sales process, a formal sales process. They're kind of making it up as they go along. There's no playbook, there's no central consistent process. And I mean, all the blocking and tackling stuff you can imagine, from introducing the company, talking about the value proposition, how to run a meeting. Speaking of how to run a meeting, another problem is salespeople not really adapting effectively to the new environment. So face-to-face, as Andrew mentioned, is kind of gone, and we're doing a lot virtually, and we need to capture people's interests very quickly. And that's a little bit of a struggle for some people. And that goes along with another problem, and I'm happy to talk about this. I'm sure Andrew and Adam will join me, is, you know, a lot of buyers are distracted at the moment. So if you're selling something, you want to grow your business, capturing mind share, capturing people's attention in the midst of all this distraction is a little difficult. And then my favorite I'm going to talk about a little bit is not overcoming self-limiting beliefs. And I'm going to hop on some stuff that Andrew said, because like him, he had a front row seat during the 2008 recession. So I've been through three, and I'm sure Adam and Andrew probably the same thing, starting with 9/11, big crisis, big impact on the economy. Then we had the financial crisis. Obviously, that had a big impact to selling, growing your business. And then where we are now, COVID. And I'm going to tell you one overwhelming concern that I hear time and time again, and that is this series of salespeople really struggling with their own self-limiting beliefs. And I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. If you think about that little voice in your head, the one that most of you right now saying, what little voice? That little voice. And that little voice is predominantly, studies have shown, you can go on Google and check this out, you don't have to take my word for it. Studies have shown that that little voice is predominantly negative, self-critical, like, I can't believe I'm here, I can't believe this has happened again, I can't believe people aren't buying, whatever you want, you fill in the blanks, right? And what we have to deal with when companies ask us to work with their sales teams is everyone's talking about, help us with objection handling, help us with making better phone calls. But if you don't handle this one thing, none of that matters at all. And the one thing is to overcome these self-limiting beliefs. And what I find ironic, and I'd love to hear from others, is when I talk to people, they give me a laundry list that's a mile long of all the reasons why someone's not going to buy, and they haven't even gotten on the phone yet. It's like all these things that you have in your head that literally create these monstrous barriers to you making a connection to somebody. So if you can imagine not overcoming that, you're literally arriving on the phone or a Zoom call with all of that in the background. And so until you can effectively address that stuff, we feel that everything else kind of pales in comparison. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a little bit of a context setter for wondering if other people are going through the same thing.
Adam and Andrew, would you like to respond to that directly, or you want to go to the questions that we have already set? Would you like to respond to what Charles just presented?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point. I think self-doubt, when COVID first came, self-doubt, like, obviously crept into all of us, right? And I think there's some positives to COVID in terms of how we're looking at our businesses and how we're doing things. And one of the things for me, which I think is really important, is I really started to try and understand what my value was. Like, and I don't think I was really thinking about it before, what my value add to clients and prospective clients was. So just off the back of what Charles was saying, I think understanding our value and what we really have to offer is incredibly important, because even though we're all still virtual, you know, I run an events company, but there's still a way that I can add value. So I think thinking about the value that we're able to add is like an incredibly important thing. But yeah, draining the self-doubt is obviously an incredible difficult thing, which I know Charles is an expert in supporting people with.
Andrew, unmute.
Sorry, modern technology.
Yeah.
I actually did pose this question to, I joined one of our sales team, had a call, and I did actually ask this question, and the guys were all confident. They were like, no, I still pick up the phone and make a call. I find that, I call an office, it gets diverted to someone's cell phone. They said maybe the first week they were like, all right, I'm intimidated, I'm intruding on someone's, working from home, but they very quickly got into their mindset that it was their office, and they, I was actually really impressed, and it was kind of a resounding kind of, confidence. And I was like, well, shoot, let's just try and crack on business as normal.
Okay, so Andrew, I wanted to ask you a question that sort of picks up on some of these themes. Obviously, our business practices have changed dramatically right now during COVID and getting out of the crisis, and what we're looking forward to. I understand you've spoken a bit about pivoting to add value to business development. Do you want to elaborate on that idea a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Susan. I mean, listen, I don't think there's a sales-driven organization in the world that hasn't, had to reassess its business strategy. Ultimately, there's been some organizations out there that, have been able to capitalize on what's happening, but for the vast majority, a number of companies have really felt their backs against the wall, maybe if not worse. But thinking about it, I think it's kind of clear to really define, what is a pivot when it comes to business, because typically a pivot is something that requires strategy, planning, it's reassessing, essentially things that, need to change because you're not addressing the needs of your intended market. When you're looking at business development initiatives, if you've always done something a certain way and it's no longer garnering the results, you really need to shift gears. But COVID's different. COVID really snuck up on us. And I've got a very, very quick anecdote. I was watching the news the other day, and they were down in New Orleans because there was a hurricane brewing in the Gulf of Mexico. And obviously, everyone knows what happened with Hurricane Katrina. But they interviewed a store owner, and he said, look, I'm not worried about hurricanes. They are what they are. I actually can prepare for hurricanes. I can speak to my suppliers. I can do this, speak to my clients. What bothers me is tornadoes, because they come out of nowhere, and I don't have any time to prepare, and it can end up being worse. So I actually thought that was quite poignant, especially with Hurricane Katrina, but kind of in line with what's happening at the moment. So I really feel that, in essence, to pivot is to plan and to strategize. But with COVID, I feel we've had to be reactionary. While there is, there is a sense that this might be temporary. A, how long is temporary? And B, well, what if the likelihood that things, really aren't ever the same again? So I think from a sales and business development perspective, you've always got to be ready to change, given whatever the circumstances are. Recessions happen, natural disasters happen, things are always going to come up with new technologies. And, we see it a lot in our industry. I work in a technology service business, it's essentially a SaaS model. And as I mentioned, I've been speaking to a lot of our, sales directors, trying to get their feedback. I started out cold calling, literally just sat there during the day, just picked up the phone, hammered out calls from 9 till 4:30, 5 o'clock. But, we've now traditionally moved to more of a, especially since in our industry, it's more networking events, scheduled in-person meetings, traditional direct sales tactics. We can't do those right now, essentially. So, what are people really doing today? And there's different levels to this, and it really depends on, who you're speaking to within an organization. If it's essentially, someone pretty senior, I think they really need to review, how diversified is their target market. New bankruptcies are coming from all areas. You can't avoid it. If your target market is struggling economically, how transferable is your product? Or service to new markets. I think that's the first thing that people are really looking at when COVID kind of kicked off. How specialized are you? Without abandoning your core customer base, how can you shift gears to kind of realign in these times? And in addition to that, can you look within your current customer base? How can you expand on those relationships to utilize those to access new customer segments? Now, I think, Charles will likely expand on that, but, there's creative ways. I mean, essentially we've done it, and, I won't go too deep into it, but, those are ways that we position what we're selling to drive new business. I cover partnerships. You know, I think one thing we had to do was take a look at our current partnerships and really look, you know, at what ways we could develop those further. You know, partnerships should be two-way. You know, what initially drove the partnership in the first place? I guarantee there is always more you can do to, you know, support your partners to better achieve your goals. They just really need to be reevaluated. And a lot of people are just having more open, frank conversations nowadays. The other thing we've done, which we found quite effective, you know, we essentially moved from just individual sales guys going out there trying to find, you know, their own clients to actually working more in teams, you know, sharing ideas. You know, we restructured things, you know, and we found it to be really effective. You know, we don't want people out there just beating the drum on their own, you know, not getting anywhere. They might feel like, you know, alluding back to what Charles was saying with the mentality, but to working in teams and to kind of sharing ideas and successes, and then also learning off knockbacks and what's not working. You know, will we need to move more from a direct selling, you know, to more focus and investment into marketing? Probably. You know, it's just a different way of reaching people. So I think, you know, for those that were more focused on just utilizing their sales force to go out there and marketing was supporting them, maybe the shift has to come, you know, a bit more the other way. I also do find it interesting, and, you know, this is just my perception of it, but when you do an in-person meeting, because of body language and everything, you typically have everybody's attention. You're essentially kind of all around a room, and there's a certain, well, I hope there's a certain level of decorum that people are kind of involved. You know, I know the age-old story that, you know, you start to lose people, whatever, but it's very different when you're on a Zoom meeting. People can actually, without you even realizing, multitask, and you really don't have, you know, their full scope of attention. So this is another area, you know, effectively where, you know, we're at a disadvantage and we need to plan for, because we don't have these formal setups where we can go in and do a presentation. You know, how do we keep that person engaged? How long does the call have to be? You know, these are all things that, you know, people have had to really rework. You know, so I do hope, you know, we go back to the traditional meeting format. But, you know, for the time being, we just have to keep people engaged in what we're trying to sell. And I think I'll kind of end, even for those companies that have had to restructure bad debt through, you know, Chapter 11 filings and stuff like that, you know, they've had to get creative in ways to kind of dig themselves out of the hole that they found themselves in. And one I actually found interesting was Gold's Gym. They actually are fielding offers for potential buyers, you know, through this administrative reorganizing, but they're also at the same time, they're offering new franchisees a model option that has a much smaller footprint and lower investment requirements. So they've pivoted, you know, at a time when, you know, they've had to do their debt restructuring, but they're still focused on achieving their goals and driving the business forward. So I think everything's kind of aligning. And, you know, I'll just wrap up that, you know, while I do feel that essentially what we're going through right now is reactionary, we've been in it 3 months. So, you know, at what point does it really have to be a fundamental change to look at a pivot, to really think, well, you know, what does the next 2 to 3 years for my, and longer, what does that look like for our industry?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Great example on the Gold's Gym too. Thank you very much. Okay, Adam, I have a question for you. It's sort of, we'll pick up, I guess, on, you know, Andrew laying out the landscape. How long are we in this? We're all every day on Zoom, Skype, or other digital platforms on a daily basis. What do you think the future is for us to get back to in-person networking, and how will it be different than it was before?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly tough question. I think back to Andy's point, a lot of it is that the landscape is constantly changing, which makes it difficult for us to predict where things are going and how things are going to do. I mean, what we've been doing incredibly successful at the moment is moving our events platforms obviously online, and we've been hosting big conferences and fundraising events for nonprofits, and have taken that all online. At the moment, there's been a huge appetite for virtual events. For obvious reasons. People are stuck at home, they're looking for engagement tools, ways to feel like life has some level of normality. And so that appetite is there. As we're going along the journey a bit, and we're 3-4 months in now since COVID first came around, we're getting concerned and that appetite is draining a little bit. And, you know, people have been glued to their screens now for so long. Once the world starts opening up a little bit more and social distancing becomes a bit relaxed, are people going to want to engage in virtual content? The flip side of that is here in New York, which we can speak from experience with, it's highly unlikely that any in-person networking events are going to be happening at a certain scale by the end of the year. I mean, for me, it's not really about the restrictions. It's about the mentality of people wanting to go to events. Are people going to feel comfortable going to a 300, 400 person event, even if they're allowed to? Even if we do go to that event, how different is that event going to be? So the landscape is very different. So we're in this middle ground at the moment of, yes, we're doing virtual content. Yes, it's been very successful, but there's a window. And with summer coming up here on the East Coast, people start to venture out a bit more. So we're kind of in that middle ground of, we're ready to get back to some in-person events, because back to Annie's point again a little bit, is there's nothing like face-to-face networking. You know, when you're engaging with that person, you're trying to get a deal done, you can read off the body language, and it makes things a bit more manageable in terms of deal flow, whereas this Zoom aspect makes it difficult to do that. So we're in this middle ground of, how long have we got for virtual events, and then when do we shift back to in-person events? Now, we are actually hosting a few in-person events as early as the end of August, but we're hosting golf days. Now, golf is considered one of the ideal social distancing sports, unless you watch the PGA Tour at the moment. They may not tell you the same. And so we're trying to think of creative ways that we can constantly be engaging people with what we do. So golf days is one, right? You can send people out, but not everyone's a golfer. So how do you constantly be engaging people? If I was to predict what I think will happen, is I think events will start very small in person. I think organizations that run events will start with 10 to 15, 20 people engaging on more on an intimate level. And then they'll kind of grow as time goes to get back to a place where we'll be happy with having, you know, fans at an NBA game again, for example. So I think we still have a journey to go along. I think it's still going to be slowly. I think there's going to be a big benefit when in-person networking events happen, because I think they're going to be more intimate. I think they're going to be more exclusive, which I think really creates an opportunity. You know, a little bit contradictory to myself a little bit. When you go to a huge event with 500, 600 people, you might meet some people that have no relevance to what you're doing. Whereas if you're in a much smaller, intimate environment, you know, you can get to know those 10, 15 people quite well, and it creates much more of an engaging business opportunity. So I don't think virtual is really going away. I think it will tire out slightly, and I think organizations have to be thinking on what is engaging content and what do we have to do to keep people staying online with what we want to do. But then that level of intimacy, I think, is probably the way that we're going to be moving forward, at least for the next 6-7 months, with much smaller events and convening. So that's just a few predictions from my end of in-person networking.
Okay, thank you, Adam, very much. Charles, wanted to ask you something about, you know, salespeople. How do they need to look at this new landscape? I know you spoke about it a little bit in your introduction. What do you advise to improve sales efforts, productivity, and find some new opportunities in the second half of the year in light of COVID?
Thanks for the question, Susan. So
sure.
I was struck by something Andrew said, which is to pivot is to plan. And I do think that we tend to get very reactionary, especially salespeople. We go for the lowest hanging fruit, the quick win. And I think planning is going to be essential. Now, we have a lot to say about planning in my company, because we got a lot of eyeballs rolling when you say planning, because people have like a whole lot of baggage attached to what is planning. What we recommend is we need some new thought leadership. We need to tap into some of the ideas that we haven't tapped into before to react and to pivot and to plan. And I think one way to do that at a strategic level first, and I can give you some tactics in a minute, but one thing we've been doing for years actually, and we think now it's more important than ever, is to form a sales growth team. And a sales growth team is multifunctional. Like you would think, oh, we need to improve sales, we need to develop a sales process, we're going to give it to sales. That's a horrible mistake, because sales can't see the forest for the trees, and they're not getting any new fresh ideas. If you form a sales growth team that's multifunctional, meaning sales, marketing, human resources, finance, operations for sure, and executive leadership, those are the 6 functions we recommend. And they meet frequently, because right now it's necessary to get all these ideas on the table. What you're going to find out is you're going to be posing questions other people in the rest of the organization are going to be posing questions on how to pivot, how to deal with this new environment we're going into. It's interesting because I'm actually finding that you would think when COVID first struck, and there were a lot of people running around with their heads cut off like chickens, that that was a panic moment. I actually think the panic moment is what we're getting into now, which is a lot of uncertainty. I got my PPP loan. I kind of now, I'm dealing with this. I'm learning how to use Zoom, but I really don't know how's the new world going to look like and what are we going to have to position ourselves at. So I think one critical question that we really invite every company to consider in this multidiscipline sales growth team environment is, it's a little bit of like what Adam and Andrew were saying, how do we represent our offering as an investment, not as a cost? Because if a buyer can say, if a buyer can see, oh, I pay you 1 and I get back 5, if you can demonstrate how that's going to happen, then I'm likely to buy from you. But if all I keep perceiving is that you're an additional cost, then that's a completely different sale. It's a high pressure sale. It's a low close sale. So I think that's a big question to ask. And it kind of goes along with what is our value, but it goes beyond what is our value. It's like, what is our value that people are willing to get, that people will get a return on investment. And what we often laugh at is, you know, especially when you talk to finance people, people tend to think of ROI in dollars and cents. That's not true. It is true, it can be dollars and cents, but ROI can be other things also. It can be improved productivity. It can be shortening a delivery cycle. It can be improving a supply chain. So there's a lot of other returns that aren't just financial. So that's something important. And then tactically, I think salespeople, again, have to learn, again, I have to go back to some stuff that Andy just said, and that is, and also Adam, I think he mentioned it. It's like when you're on a Zoom, you kind of feel like you've lost chemistry. And I'm not sure I totally agree with that. Yes, I get you don't have the body language and you can tell if someone's fiddling with their iPhone while you're talking. But I will say that one thing that you need to figure out quickly to keep people's attention is storytelling. I think salespeople have to learn to become good at not long-winded stories, anecdotes. Like, we have a client just like yours, same situation, here's what we did, and this was the tangible benefit. We coach everybody to stick a number in the benefit, meaning that they won't remember the story, but the moment we say we improved sales by 30%, they'll do, wait a minute, what was that? 30%, give me that again. That wakes people up. So you gotta have some, I think it's good to have a library of anecdotes that have measurable, quantifiable benefits in them, so that when you do tell someone a story, you can tell them, you can demonstrate that it worked for them. And one more thing, and then I'm happy to push it back to you, Susan. I really, really, really am passionate about something Adam said, and we've been doing this for years, and that is networking. And, you know, I'm going to tell you, I used to get very frustrated with networking, even before COVID, because you'd go to these cheese and wine parties and, you know, you run to the bar, you stuff your face with cheese and wine, and you don't network with anybody. And worse, when you do network with people, you're weeding out all the people you really don't want to talk to. So if I think you're today, if you could combine Zooming and in-person networking, like Adam said, in an intimate setting, here's what we've been advocating. And I know Adam and I are going to talk later, but this is something that, like I said, I'm really passionate about. Because what I'm thinking is, if the Zoom could do the weeding out part, by the time you do the physical part, it's a qualified audience. These are all people that really want to talk to each other. And one thing we used to say is, for God's sake, when you go to a networking event, get friendly with the host and tell the host, here's what I'm looking for: a VP of sales, a CEO with a sales team. Do you know anybody at this event? They're the host. They know who's there. And she's going to say, yeah, that guy, that person, that woman, that other person. You want an intro? And so it kind of immediately gets rid of all that stuff that is a waste of time. So I kind of think we have a unique opportunity to combine the two things we've been doing, the virtual with the physical.
Okay, thanks, Charles. And actually, you know, interesting that you're saying that about targeted leads for people you want to be introduced to, because that's certainly something the Global Chamber prides itself in. So if you become a member, and if, you know, you need some of that, if you're not at an event, but you want to get into our membership, that's part of what we do with our warm introductions. Okay, so to add on to, you know, what's already been discussed and, you know, just mentioned by Charles about, you know, we're in the panic mode. What stage do you think we're at in the impact of COVID on business? Andrew, do you have any thoughts you want to add to, you know, what you think the trajectory is right now for business post-COVID or post-COVID crisis, phase one?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly different for us here in New York. I mean, we're preparing, you know, we're all getting excited, and everyone that doesn't live here is asking me what's happening. And, you know, we're getting excited about, you know, what's going to be reopening. Other states have already done that. And unfortunately, if we'd done this a week ago, my answer would have been very different, because we've now had a fresh flush of new cases in some of the southern states. You know, so, you know, yes, I mean, listen, the US is on track for, you know, a huge contraction in GDP, you know, and we're going to see that roll out, you know, for a while. You know, the stock market can have its ups and downs and be as optimistic with money being pumped in, but, you know, we've so many people unemployed for such a long time, and you know, how's the economy going to recover? And then you throw in this, you know, threat of another second wave. You know, what impact will that have? And I just quickly bring up an article I read the other day. It was an interview with the CEO of Hilton, and I find this pretty important because, you know, he's got a front row seat into the travel industry, and incidentally, he was appointed CEO just before 9/11 happened. And so, you know, if anyone's kind of, you know, going to give you some advice on where that's heading, it's going to be Chris Nassetta, actually, is his name. Interesting stat: Hilton's business-related travel accounts for 75% of their business, which I, you know, fair enough. You know, if you read into it and you look at all the elements, you know, that does seem right. I mean, most of us think of Hilton, you know, with beach vacation, stuff like that, but 75%. In May, they hit their lowest occupancy, 12%, which, you know, is huge. The big takeaway I got from the article: all they can do for the next year or so is focus on the leisure market. You know, they were looking at the hotels that have access to beaches where people could actually go. And they have to be prepared that, you know, they're going to take a real hit. And he actually said, I don't think we're going to get anywhere close to normal again in our market for the next 2 to 3 years. Just wrap this up. Something he actually interesting said was they've needed for a while to modernize a lot of their product. So they've taken this time with the low occupancy to digitalize a lot of their solution, especially for their VIP kind of club card members. You know, digital room check, digital room access, digital keys, that kind of thing. So, you know, like anything, they've just taken the time to, you know, revamp and remodel. But yeah, I figured the travel industry is a good a beacon and indicator as any to see how this is going to play out.
Thanks, Andrew. Adam, do you have a quick response? Because we have one more question, then we need to throw it, you know, back to the participant questions. Do you have a quick response on that, or do you feel like you've already answered that?
Yeah, no, just a super quick one. I think same as Andy. I think I would have answered this very differently last week. If this had been a week ago, I felt like when COVID first hit, same as Charles, it was all panic. Particularly being a business owner, there was complete panic. We were thinking about external contracts. What do we do? And it all happened very quickly. Then it shifted into a place of recovery. It's like, okay, what can we do now to recover? How can we be in a better position? And then last week, I would have said we were moving into a place of opportunity. So we would have started talking about where's the opportunities, what can we do? But I think actually you're right. In the US in particular, we've gone on a slight back step again, and we're into like panic phase again, just because of the uncertainty. But I do advise people and clients that we have, I'm trying to keep them pretty focused on that opportunity part. Like, how can we use this as an opportunity. Like Andy said, how can we be using technology and digital much more to be progressing with what we're doing? So I think staying focused on that opportunity aspect is going to be a really important thing for businesses moving forward.
Thank you so much, Adam. Okay, we have one last question here for this discussion part, Charles, and I know you want to share a couple of illustrations here. How should a company be thinking about building and rebuilding contact with their customers and clients?
So I knew the question was coming, so thank you, Susan. And I thought just for speed and clarity, I'd share my screen and give you guys, everybody, the opportunity to see something specific that illustrates some of the points I've been making. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. Oftentimes when I'm giving this presentation in person, people start coming up to the screen and take pictures. So you're welcome to do that. Take a picture, knock yourself out, or a screenshot. But this is a sales playbook. This is the one that we do with every company we work with. Now we customize it, but if you want to kind of get a heads up on everything we've talked about and you want to put it in specific buckets, what we recommend is you use a wiki like Wikipedia. So there's many out there. Google Docs is an example there's a wiki version. And you're just basically putting all these best practices in 5 areas: prospecting, selling, support system, and team. So prospecting and selling, I think, are pretty obvious. Prospecting generates leads, selling turns those to opportunities and works them through the funnel. Support, that's what I said before about a sales growth team. System, all the stuff you're going to use your CRM like salesforce.com, all the best practices. And then lastly, team is really important because I think there's a lot of knowledge in people's heads. Like I know if I worked for Andy and I was on his team, like he says he works with a lot of salespeople in his company, he might say, hey guys, give us some ideas, give us some stories. What do you want to talk about? What are you hearing out in the field? That would be a place for people to share. And then one more thing to answer Susan's question, I want to give you a little bit of a graphic that's actually something I would encourage you to do tomorrow or today with a team, cross-functional. Again, back to that sales, marketing, operations, finance, human resources, executive leadership. And what I want to say is directly to the question, if you're going to develop and redevelop relationships with customers, to save you reinventing the wheel or to give you a model, there are 6 relationships we think you should be having in an organization. At the bottom, a suspect is names and numbers. You want to get lots of those because you want to turn them to prospects. Then you want to convert prospects to customer. Now we define customer as someone who buys from you on price. They're not loyal. They'll go somewhere else if they get a better price. So you want to switch them to a client who actually appreciates doing business and how you do business. And then my favorite is an advocate. An advocate is a relationship you've established with a customer who not only values you, but wants to give back, meaning you've made them look good, you got them a promotion, a bonus. And so if you're going to ask for referrals, testimonials, case studies, those people will do that for you. My favorite, the top one, not necessarily my favorite, is partner. And a partner is someone who gives you a ton of business, but they become a partner because they can't live without you, meaning the switching costs. So if I was dealing with Andrew's FX company and he's providing all this expertise and technology, and I have to go somewhere else to a competitor because for whatever reason, that's going to be painful. And a partner is someone who takes your solution and adds it to their solution to get more business. 2 more things I want to say. So once you understand those relationships, I just think it's a good practice, especially coming out of COVID, that we should brainstorm again with that sales growth team and figure out what are the marketing activities we're going to do at each of these levels and what are the selling activities at each of these levels. Now you could say operations, what are you going to do? But I think these 2 for generating business are important. And if you think about it, there are 6 buckets and 2 columns. There are 6 marketing buckets, 1 for each level, and 6 selling buckets, 1 for each level. That's 12 buckets. That's a lot of activity. So if you can get people's ideas into that document, like Adam, I think, said golf games. Let's do a golf game. Okay, great. When are we going to do it? How much money are we putting to that? That's a marketing event. We got to think about that. Finance, are you on board? That's why finance is involved. How much you want to spend? I don't know, 5 grand. Will that do it? Yeah, 5 grand. How many people do we want to invite? Who's going to send out the invites? Think about all the work. On the selling side, when you meet with a partner, maybe you're talking about planning. Hey, you've just come out of this COVID situation. How are you guys dealing with it? You want to do some planning with us? Give us a heads up that we can help you potentially navigate your way through this for the next 6, 9, 12 months ahead. So I just want to leave that up there because I think it's another idea that you can use. It's very simple to implement and would generate a ton of thought leadership.
Excellent. Okay, Charles, thank you very much. Doug, I'm going to throw it back to you. Do you have any questions from our participants?
We have some questions. So thank you. So keep sending them into info@globalchamber.org or place them in the Q&A section. The first question, let's see, should I break this into 2? So there's actually 2 sales related questions. Maybe I'll break them up. So the first question related to something Andrew said regarding cold calling. And you said, Andrew said that you can't do that anymore. So what do you mean by that? You know, my own experience is that, you know, cold calling is much more difficult now. And so what are the next steps relative to that? How do you recommend to proceed if we can't do those anymore? Or is there a way to make them work?
Yeah, and I apologize. When I meant cold calling, I meant when you had cold calling as your #1 route to getting clients. You know, we all used to watch the movie Boiler Room and think that was who we were when we were cold calling out to get out there. Unfortunately, cold calling is still a necessary evil, but it's got to be a lot more strategized. You can't just call up, and especially with the resources you have nowadays, you can't just call up and ask to speak to someone by job title. You really need to call in. You need to have a story. You need to have a name. You need to have a reason for calling. You know, and I always found that kind of leading softly. You know, you're just trying to get a foot in the door. And you know typically what we employ in that facility here is we actually have you know, small team actually based in one of our offices that you know, does the outreach. You know, because it essentially you need to get your name in front of someone. And cold calling is, you know, it is still a way to do it. I find the problem in the US though is, and a lot of you might agree with me, people don't like to answer their phones to numbers they don't know. And especially if it comes up with a company name that's calling, it gets a little bit tricky. But it is a numbers game. And just back to kind of clarify what I meant is if you just sit and pound the phones all day, you're not going to get the results that you want. You know, you could get lucky. You could get a couple of big whales, hit your quota for the year and move on. But in an ideal world, you know, you really need to have more structure in place to how you're going out from a direct selling perspective. And that is the networking. That's the being involved with organizations, you know, join things like the Global Chamber to really kind of, you know, be relevant, be in front of people and have them see your product and, you know, essentially kind of come to their own conclusion while being guided through you as a, you know, as a salesperson.
I think just to jump on that as well, sorry, Doug, just slightly, is that we're in a society at the moment with everything that's going on where trust is a massive issue. We've all got budgets that have become incredibly restrained. And so we have to be more meaningful and thoughtful of where we place our budgets, right? So cold calling isn't top of the list of where people are going to spend their budgets because they normally don't know that organization. They don't have a tried and tested way of using the platform. And they essentially don't have a relationship with you, right? In that traditional sense of, you know, being Brits, you might go to a bar, have a beer with someone, and the next thing you're doing business with someone, right? So, but we don't have that opportunity now. So one of the things we've really tried to do is shift away from cold calling is really utilizing and maximizing our relationships. And I know Charles mentioned this as well. One of the main reasons I wanted to become a member of the Global Chamber is because this is a vetted system, right? I'm going to be talking to people who are part of a vetted platform who I know that I can communicate with, and we can look at what transactions can be done between each other in a meaningful way. So one of my pieces of advice as well is if people are thinking of shifting away from cold calling is think about the relationship development, how you can build a relationship, and how you can also utilize current relationships within reason to be getting introductions into people. Because we've actually brought on a number of clients during COVID just because we've got warm introductions from people who know the services that we offer. So there's different ways to think about it when you're thinking of pivoting from the cold calling system as well.
Got it. And Charles, you're welcome to answer this as well, but the next question I think refers to something that you had said, and that is regarding the little voice inside that that either people won't buy now and or, you know, everything is frozen. So this person's saying basically everybody is just saying, you know, come back to us in a few months. So is there a way to deal with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a silver bullet answer, but if any of the other panelists do, feel free to jump in. But my thinking around this is, you know, when you have that voice in your head, people say, what do you do? And I say, it's actually what you don't do that matters. And the very thing you must not do is act from that little voice, right? You can't get rid of it. Maybe surgery, you remove half your brain, maybe that'll get rid of it. But you need to be able to, so here's what I say. You know, when I hear no one's buying, this sucks, life sucks, I go, thank you for sharing. And this is what I'm going to do anyway. And the problem is, if you don't have a this is what I'm going to do anyway, then you're going to be in trouble. So you really need to set up a whole bunch of this is what I'm going to do anyway. And so you want to create, that's why we think it's so important to have a sales playbook, because that's full of this is what I'm going to do. So you want to have, what do you say? How do you react? The biggest issue I find with people who are succumbing to this kind of self-defeating dialogue, and I like the positive, you know, you want to be positive, you want to get out there, is don't think about selling anything, because that's going to get you into trouble and that's going to put a lot of pressure on you. Like if you're just making cold calls or Zoom calls to sell a transaction, I think you're going to get defeated over and over again. Eventually that's going to wear on you. What I want you to consider is a small shift. And the small shift is develop relationships and develop long-lasting relationships, meaning let people get to know you. You get to know them. Someone once said to me, the simplest piece of advice, in order to be interesting, be interested. So be interested in people, ask some really good questions. So that means you should write down some really good questions to ask, not like, what's the weather like out there? That's not a good question. A good question is, tell me about your supply chain being broken. If you happen to know that the person you're calling with has a whole bunch of problems, even better, put a list, if you're doing a Zoom call, put a list of 10 common problems that are happening in the industry that that person you're calling is likely to be struggling with. And just say, do any one of these jump out at you? Yeah, number 1, number 3, and number 5. And so if that happens, then you've literally stopped selling and you're now listening. Like, tell me more. Okay, so number 1, you pick those for a reason. So I think this whole idea of developing a relationship is important. I'll give you one tip if you want it. When you start the phone call, ring, ring, someone picks up, why don't you put on the table the things you think you're likely to hear so you don't sound defensive when you get them. So it'll sound something like this. Hey, so happy, you know, we were referred to you. Thank you for picking up. You know, I'm hearing that people have no budget. They're really busy right now and they're very distracted. I'm not sure if that's the case with you, but can we put that aside and just talk about your business? And so in a way, putting those objections on the table ahead of time kind of diffuses the pressure that the other person might feel. But, you know, it's kind of tough. Cold calling is tough. And I think it's a strategy. It's not a single thing. You got to warm it up. You got to use LinkedIn. You got to make phone calls. You got to link everything together.
Absolutely. Well stated. And we only have 5 minutes. So we have a big question. so probably the best thing to do would maybe just to go around the table 1 or 2 minutes each and then use that as your closing as well. anything else that you want to cover. It is a big question. So it's considering pivoting and considering how we should proceed in the second half in a different way. You've already talked about that planning is required. It seems like there needs to be some sort of an assembly of what the opportunities are, and then identifying which ones are the best, maybe pick one, and then from that, develop a process and an implementation. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of activity that involves multiple people. So what's your recommendation for our business that, you know, is looking to pivot, looking to add something, but considering how much work is going to be involved? How should we proceed? And by the way, we don't have much of a budget, if at all, you know, so it's hard to involve a lot of people from the outside. Is there a solution to our problem? Anybody want to take that one? And like I said, we probably 1 or 2 minutes each, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I mean, I really think, you know, what is the product? You know, what is the service? And it kind of comes back to my point earlier, you know, what subtle things can you do to transfer, you know, a certain element of what you've been selling and you've had success selling? You know, how can you tweak that? You know, is it transferable? You know, one big part of our industry is, you know, we service payroll companies. You know, we've done very well with that. So now, you know, we're looking to align with, you know, how we've been selling these payroll solutions. How can we sell the broader scope of our FX capabilities to these companies that are utilizing us for payroll? You know, which we'd kind of not really needed to go down that road again. So it really just depends on who your product's speaking to, and, you know, what your client base is. But, you know, clients are low-hanging fruit, and, you know, that's essentially the first place everybody should start. You know, and I feel that a lot of, you know, our sales guys have really taken a deep dive back into their prospect list. They've looked at companies that have rejected them in the past and kind of reviewed why they've rejected them. And now we're looking at a time, well, you know, those excuses aren't as relevant nowadays, especially because COVID has shifted the kind of mentality. But I feel that, you know, just by taking a deep dive and going through what you've already got, rather than forcing yourself to try and find new clients, you know, should be the first thing everybody should be doing right now.
Okay, good thoughts.
I think from my perspective, I know we've only got a few minutes, so I'll keep it quick, is we've been doing a lot of work on strategy with our clients in terms of working backwards. And what we've done is, like, what's the ultimate goal here and what's the value? I know I mentioned value earlier on, is really trying to identify the value that you have to offer clients is incredibly important. And then go back to the beginning and work out a process of how you're going to get to being able to deliver that value for your clients. Now, in terms of the workload that has to go into the strategy, I think it's something that will be continually reviewed. We've actually created with some of our clients small strategy advisory groups that are constantly reviewing the strategy at the moment on a weekly basis to look into, is this working? Are we reaching the value that we want to be delivering to our clients? And so I think, just to kind of summarize, working backwards from where your value is and how you want to be able to deliver that value is going to be an incredibly important thing in terms of delivering to clients. Because if you're offering the value, it's going to be very difficult for clients to move away if you're offering that service to them.
A really good suggestion.
And I'll jump on what Adam just said and say, figure out your value, and that's usually the value with your offering. Break your offering down into 10 features minimum, ideally 20, but do 10 features. So what's a feature of the value or the offering you're providing? And think of a spreadsheet. And for every feature, there's going to be a benefit. So what's the benefit to the customer? And then what problem does it solve, which is the opposite of the benefit? And then what question would you ask to expose that problem? Like, tell me about, followed by the problem. And then what story or anecdote could you tell someone that will demonstrate that you've provided that solution, remembering that you put a number in it. And if you do that 10 times, 10 rows, and you do that in a group setting, I promise you, you'll get an enormous amount of best practice sharing within your own team, where people can now begin to go, wow, I know what problems we solve. I know what questions to ask. I know where our value lives. And more importantly, I have a whole bunch of stories that I can tell people. So if I remember the question is, what can we do immediately on a low budget that's likely to put into motion something that will make an impact quickly. And I think that exercise alone would accomplish that.
Really good thoughts. Thank you all. I'll just say 30 seconds, then I'll turn it over to you, Susan, to wrap up. One of the key things that you all talked about was either working with the people that you already know, or if you're going to talk to somebody that's new, make sure that it's trusted. And that's certainly what we have been focusing in on, is building a trusted network around the world, so that if I introduce someone to Charles, that I know, Charles knows me, and so that relationship should at least start with a good conversation point, because there's trust on all sides. And so leverage that opportunity. Certainly, some of you talked about LinkedIn and continuing to build there. Those are things that are very important as well. So I want to also mention that part of what we do virtually, besides warm introductions, is events. And so we're doing between 5 and 10 a week now, which is keeping us very busy and helping our members find new people and new opportunities. And we're promoting 25 to 30 events a week. And this includes our member events that we think our members will be, other members will be interested in. So keep an eye on our weekly newsletter. If you're a member, you're getting it weekly. If you're a non-member, you're getting it monthly. And so one of the reasons why you probably should at least be connected to us is to get that information. In the next 24 hours, we have actually 3 events. So besides this one, we have a virtual dining event later today on Ethiopia. So if you're in the United States or in Latin America or Canada or Mexico, join us this afternoon at 5 Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we have actually the Ethiopian Consul General who will be talking about Ethiopian market, but it's connecting, it's networking with people who are just having dinner on Zoom. Just another day on Zoom. Then tomorrow we have a conversation about artificial intelligence with a team of people from around the world. And then we have our League of Extraordinaries. So this is only for members, but it's a great way for service providers to connect up with each other. So Susan, I turn it back to you. Thank you for pulling these experts together. I've learned a lot, noted a bunch of notes for our own sake and for our members. And so really got a lot out of it. Turn it back to you. Thank you for putting this together.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Doug. I really enjoyed it. And I think that, Charles, Andrew, and Adam taught us a lot, and, maybe reminded us about things that we already know, but how to improve our process. And I look forward to having more of these events. The 3 of them are members of the Global Chamber New York City. We're looking to add more members. So anyone on the call who's not already a member of the Global Chamber and are in the New York market, please reach out to Doug and info@Global Chamber and let us know that you're interested. And, once you become a member, then you can be an excellent speaker like the 3 of our speakers have been today. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Great
Bye-bye.
information. Thanks, guys.